A client recently asked me if I had a simple ADU design that they could build behind their existing home. At first, I thought it'd be pretty straightforward. It's a small house on a suburban backyard, so I figured I could just scale down a typical floor plan and be done with it. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that designing a small home is actually much more difficult than designing a large one. When you only have a few hundred square feet to work with, every decision comes with a trade-off. If I wanted a larger living room, something else had to shrink. If I wanted to include an office, another room had to give up that space. There really aren't any free decisions. That made me start asking a different question. Instead of wondering how much I could fit into the house, I started wondering what actually makes a house feel complete. As soon as I sat down to sketch, I realized I couldn't simply shrink a traditional house and expect it to work. Every room had to earn its place, and every square foot had to justify why it was there. I always like to start with the floor plan because it forces me to solve the biggest problems first. The walls came together quickly, but deciding what happened inside those walls took a bit longer. My first instinct was to make every room a little bit smaller, but I didn't feel like that approach was working. So I started over and changed the question. Instead of asking how small each room could become, I started asking which rooms actually deserved more space. For me, the living room quickly became the priority. If someone's living here every day, this is where most of life happens. It's where you relax after work, watch a movie, read a book, or just simply enjoy a quiet evening. I wasn't willing to sacrifice that experience just to save a few square feet. The bedroom ended up going in the opposite direction. I actually made it smaller than I normally would because, realistically, it's a room that's primarily used just for sleeping. I'd rather dedicate that extra space to the parts of the house where people actively use it throughout the day. The kitchen, it became another interesting decision. I debated whether a house this size really needed a full kitchen, or if just like a little kitchenette would be enough. In the end, I kept coming back to the same thought though. If someone's going to live here every day, shouldn't they have a real kitchen? One room I wasn't so sure about was adding this extra sort of office. I guess it could serve as a separate bedroom or, something entirely different, but I just felt like it was nice to have a second space that wasn't where your living room is, where your guests are, or your bedroom where you're sleeping. But I don't know, what would you have done? Would you have kept the office, or would you rather just maybe make a larger living room or a larger bedroom? Once I felt happy with the floor plan, I also wanted to sketch the exterior, because I wanted the architecture to be simple and approachable, and something that could just sit comfortably behind an existing suburban home without competing with it. The elevation didn't need to be super flashy, it just needed to feel like a house that belonged. With the sketch complete, it's time to bring everything into Revit and see if the ideas actually hold together. This is usually a stage where the project starts talking back to me. Things that looked great on paper suddenly feel awkward, while other ideas end up working better than I expected. One thing I kept paying attention to though was how the house felt as I moved through it. A floor plan can look perfectly organized from above, but if the circulation feels awkward or the furniture doesn't fit naturally, you find out pretty quickly once it's modeled. As I work through the house, I find myself making dozens of small adjustments. A wall might shift a few inches here, a doorway might move to improve circulation, or a window slides over just to frame a better view. None of those decisions seem very significant on their own, but together they completely change how the house feels. Natural light becomes a major focus. Because this ADU will most likely sit behind an existing home, I wanted the interior to feel bright without sacrificing too much privacy. That ended up being a balancing act throughout the project, but I'm actually curious what you would choose. If this were your house, would you rather have large windows and more daylight, or slightly smaller windows that give you a little more privacy from the main house? As the exterior started coming together, I kept resisting the urge to make the architecture more complicated. It would have been easy to add extra roof lines or decorative details, but every time I considered it, I asked myself the same question: does this actually make the house better? And most of the time the answer was no. The simpler the house became, the more comfortable it felt. Eventually, I reached my favorite part of every project, which is adding the furniture. Furniture is surprisingly honest. It doesn't care how nice your floor plan looked on paper. If a room is too small, you'll know immediately. If circulation isn't working, you'll know immediately. Thankfully, this is also the point where the project started to give me some confidence. The living room still felt generous, yet cozy. The kitchen still felt like somewhere I'd actually want to make a small meal. The office, which almost disappeared several times, suddenly felt like it belonged there all along. And that's where the biggest realization for the entire project came. Because when I started, I thought making a small house meant sacrificing things. But when I started modeling it, I realized I wasn't really removing anything. I was just deciding which parts of everyday life deserved to have the most space. With the model complete, I could finally start adding finishes and furniture and lighting and things that bring the project to life. I kept the material palette warm and understated because I wanted the house to feel comfortable rather than trendy. As I looked around the finished spaces, I found myself imagining somebody actually living here instead of just admiring the architecture. Maybe they're reading a book on the couch, or making breakfast in the morning, or working quietly in the office in the afternoon. Those are the moments I wanted the house to support. Outside, I wanted the architecture to just belong. The goal was never to compete with the main house. Instead, I wanted it to feel like it had always been part of the property. Simple forms with warm materials, thoughtful landscaping, and a covered porch all help reinforce that idea. And speaking of the porch, I still don't think I would have made it any smaller. If anything, it's one of those spaces I'd probably use the most. I don't know, would you have kept it, or would you have stolen some of that square footage to make the interior a little larger? So when I first started this project, I thought making a smaller house meant sacrificing things. By the end, I don't think that's what happened at all. What surprised me the most was realizing that I wasn't really removing rooms, I was deciding which parts of everyday life deserved to have the right amount of space. Living room, it became more important than the bedroom. The porch survived every round of revisions. The office almost disappeared, but ended up making the house feel more complete to me. I didn't end up with less house. I ended up with a house that was simply more intentional. Now, I'd love to hear what you have done differently. Would you have kept the office or use it for something else? Would you want the bedroom larger? And would you have traded the porch? I'm genuinely curious because I don't think there's any one right answer to design, and everybody lives their life differently. If you'd like the floor plans, renderings, and design package for this project, they're available on Patreon. But either way, thanks for coming along with me on this. As always, stay curious and design with intent.